Hello, my friend. Tonight, let's sit together in a quiet corner of thought where the noise of the world fades and only the soft pulse of curiosity remains. I want to begin with a question, one that lingers in all of us, though we rarely speak it aloud. What if there is more within you than you've ever dared to believe? What if the limits you feel pressing in are not walls, but doors waiting to be opened? This book we are about to walk through is not simply a guide filled with theories or dry research. It's a lantern, a light held high over the dark corners of our doubts, showing us that potential is not reserved for the chosen few. It is hidden in everyone, in you, in me, in the person you pass by on the street who seems unremarkable at first glance but may carry a fire they themselves have yet to discover. And before we dive deeper, let me pause to ask a small favor. If you find this summary helpful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to BookSnap, and comment below the title of the book you'd like us to summarize next. We'll make it happen soon. Now let's step forward into the story. Think back to a time when you watch someone perform with effortless brilliance. A musician who seems to breathe symphonies, an athlete moving with impossible grace, a speaker who captivates a room with nothing more than their voice. It's easy, almost natural to whisper to yourself, they were born for this. The idea of potential feels like magic, as though the universe sprinkled a little extra stardust on certain people and left the rest of us to admire from afar. But here's the truth Adam Grant compels us to face. That story we tell ourselves is incomplete. Potential is not found. It is built. Consider the story of a child who struggles with reading. In the early years, words blur together, letters dance on the page, and teachers quietly suggest they may never catch up. But day after day, the child keeps turning pages, sounding out syllables, stumbling, failing, trying again. Slowly, imperceptibly, the lines begin to sharpen. A decade later, that same child is not only reading, but writing stories that move hearts. Was this child destined from birth to be a writer? No. The potential was hidden, obscured by struggle, only revealed because persistence unlocked it. We all have versions of that story in our own lives. Maybe it's the career we once thought beyond reach, the instrument we put down after the first sour notes, the dream we dismissed as childish. Hidden potential is not the absence of failure. It is the invitation within failure to try again. And so the book begins not with the extraordinary, but with the ordinary. With the understanding that greatness often wears a plain disguise. A seed does not look like the towering oak it will become. A rough stone does not reveal the gleam of the diamond hidden inside. Likewise, the person you are today may not yet look like the version of yourself you could be. And that is the point. We live in a culture obsessed with finished products. We admire the polished performance, the final masterpiece, the flawless game. Rarely do we see the invisible hours of practice, the discarded drafts, the tears shed in private. But to see only the end and not the beginning is to mistake the flower for the root. Hidden potential begins where no one is watching, where the effort looks clumsy, where the results are anything but impressive. There is a beauty in this truth, because it levels the ground beneath our feet. If potential were purely a matter of birth, then most of us would have no choice but to accept our limits. But if potential can be uncovered, shaped, expanded, then the story of our lives is still unwritten. It means that your past struggles are not evidence of what you lack, but clues to what you might yet discover. Adam Grant reminds us that potential is not a destination. It is a horizon that shifts as you walk toward it. Every step forward reveals a little more of what you can become, and though the horizon may never be reached, the journey itself transforms you. That, perhaps, is the real secret. Potential is not about becoming someone else. It is about revealing the fullness of who you already are. So, as we begin, let's hold on to this thought. You are not finished. Whatever you have achieved so far, whatever mistakes you have made, whatever doubts cling to your mind, they are not the final word. Inside you, there is still more, hidden, waiting, alive. And in the chapters ahead, we will walk together through the landscapes of growth, resilience, and discovery. We will see how failure becomes teacher, how struggle becomes strength, how learning becomes joy. Each page will whisper the same reminder. The spark of potential is already within you. All that's left is to bring it into the light. Think back to your earliest school days. Do you remember the children who seemed to grasp everything instantly? The ones who solved math problems in seconds, played piano flawlessly without lessons, or ran faster than anyone else on the playground? They were praised, singled out, and often labeled as gifted. And maybe, somewhere deep inside, you believed a quiet story about yourself. If I'm not like them, maybe I never will be. This is the myth of natural talent. The idea that some are simply born extraordinary and the rest of us are destined to watch from the sidelines. It is a myth that runs deep in our culture. We celebrate the child prodigy, the overnight sensation, the genius whose brilliance appears without effort. But this narrative, Adam Grant urges us to see, blinds us to the truth of how greatness actually grows. Talent alone is like a spark. It can flash brightly for a moment, but without fuel, it fizzles out. What sustains greatness over years, over decades, is not the gift of being born different, but the choice to keep going when things are hard. Consider Mozart, so often held up as the archetype of effortless genius. Yes, he began composing as a child, but what we rarely mention is the relentless practice his father demanded of him, the countless hours of repetition, the failures and revisions behind every piece. Or think of Michael Jordan, cut from his high school basketball team before becoming the legend we know. The story of natural talent leaves out the work, and it is the work that reveals the hidden potential. Perhaps you've looked at someone successful and whispered to yourself, "I could never do that." But what if their advantage is not something mystical in their DNA, but rather the willingness to stumble, to endure, to stay on the field or the stage long after the applause has faded? If that's true, then their story could also be yours. The myth of talent is dangerous because it steals hope. When we believe only the innately gifted can achieve greatness, we stop before we've even begun. We excuse ourselves from trying, thinking the door was locked from the start. But hidden potential is not found behind locked doors. It is built by walking down hallways most people avoid because they are dimly lit, uncomfortable, or long. Imagine a small plant growing between cracks in the pavement. No one expects it to thrive there, in the shadow of concrete and steel. Yet, given a little light and rain, it pushes through. That is what persistence does. It turns the unlikely into the inevitable. This book teaches us to honor effort as much as we admire talent, to celebrate not just the person who shines early, but the one who struggles, who learns slowly, who keeps showing up even when no one is watching. Because when you remove the myth, you realize the truth. Hidden potential lives not in those who start fastest, but in those who refuse to stop. So ask yourself, what stories about talent have you believed? Have you told yourself you can't sing because your voice cracked once as a child? That you're not athletic because you tripped in gym class? That you're not creative because your drawing looked messy? These small, early judgments shape the cages we live in as adults, but cages built from myths can be broken. And when they break, a wider horizon appears. The beauty of letting go of the myth is that it frees you to be a beginner again. It gives you permission to grow slowly, awkwardly, imperfectly, because that is how real potential is uncovered. The child prodigy may burn brightly, but the late bloomer often builds a deeper, steadier fire. And so, in this journey, we will learn to unlearn the myth, to stop worshiping talent, and instead, to bow before persistence, resilience, and the quiet courage to keep going. Because the truth is simple, and it's liberating. You don't need to be born extraordinary. You only need to be willing to become it. Picture yourself standing at the base of a mountain. The peak towers above, shrouded in mist, and the path that leads upward is rocky, steep, and uncertain. You take a few steps, stumble, scrape your knee, and for a moment you wonder if it's even worth continuing. Most of us, when faced with struggle, see it as a sign to stop. We whisper, "Maybe this isn't for me." But what if struggle is not the enemy, but the very terrain where hidden potential is born? Adam Grant challenges us to fall in love with the struggle. Not because struggle feels good, it rarely does. Struggle is uncomfortable, embarrassing, often painful. But it is within this discomfort that growth roots itself. A muscle only strengthens when pushed to its limits. A mind only expands when stretched by difficulty. Potential doesn't bloom in the absence of struggle. It blooms through it. Think of Thomas Edison, who famously remarked that he had not failed, but simply discovered 10,000 ways that did not work. Each so-called failure was not a closed door, but a lantern lighting the next step forward. Struggle is the sculptor, chiseling away at what is unnecessary until only strength remains. And perhaps you've experienced this yourself. Remember the first time you tried something completely new, maybe speaking a foreign language, playing an instrument, or stepping into a job you weren't sure you could handle. At first, it felt like drowning. The words came out wrong, the notes sounded off, the tasks seemed overwhelming. But then, slowly, through the repeated friction of error and correction, something shifted. One day, you spoke a full sentence and were understood. One day, your fingers found the right keys and a melody emerged. One day, the task that once terrified you became second nature. That moment, the quiet triumph after repeated struggle, is proof of hidden potential revealed. Our culture often hides these messy beginnings. We see the author's polished book, but not the rejected drafts. We hear the musician's flawless performance, but not the endless wrong notes played in solitude. We watch the athlete score and forget the years of early mornings, sore muscles, and private losses. If struggle were shown in full, we would see that greatness is not the absence of difficulty, but the mastery of it. So why does struggle matter so much? Because it reshapes our relationship with ourselves. When you embrace struggle, you are telling yourself, "I am more than my present limits." You are declaring that your identity is not fixed, that you can bend, stretch, and grow. Each time you push against the edge of your abilities, you expand them. Each time you stay in the discomfort, you redefine what is possible. But to love struggle is not easy. It means reframing failure as a teacher, not an indictment. It means welcoming mistakes as stepping stones, not proof of inadequacy. Imagine a child learning to walk. They fall again and again, but no one calls them a failure. Every fall is part of walking itself. So why, as adults, do we call our falls defeat? The truth is, the process never changed. To stumble is to learn. To struggle is to grow. And there is something else, something deeper. Struggle humbles us. It strips away the illusion that we are supposed to have it all together, that success should be effortless. It reminds us that we are human, beautifully imperfect, endlessly unfinished, and in that humility we find connection. We realize that everyone struggles, that we are not alone in the hard climb. So tonight, if you are facing a challenge that feels too heavy, if you feel the sting of failure pressing on your chest, remember this. The struggle is not evidence that you lack potential. It is the very soil from which your hidden potential is growing. The mountain is not meant to intimidate you. It is meant to shape you as you climb. Fall in love with the struggle, not because it is pleasant, but because it is the doorway. The path forward is not paved in ease, but in effort. And every scar, every stumble, every moment of doubt is not a detour. It is the journey itself. Imagine a violinist sitting alone in a dimly lit practice room. The melody that later will sweep through concert halls does not begin as music. It begins as noise. Squeaks, missed notes, awkward pauses. Yet hour after hour the bow moves across the strings, correcting, adjusting, refining. What looks from the outside like talent is, in truth, practice layered upon practice, invisible to everyone except the one doing the work. This is the science of practice, the slow alchemy that transforms effort into excellence. Adam Grant reminds us that greatness doesn't emerge from doing something mindlessly over and over, but from doing it deliberately. Deliberate practice means focusing on the edges of your ability, the places where mistakes multiply and frustration builds. It is not about repeating what you already know. It is about reaching for what you cannot yet do. Think of it like sharpening a blade. Running it gently across the whetstone once or twice won't change much, but steady, precise strokes, applied again and again, wear away the dullness until the edge gleams. In the same way, deliberate practice cuts through mediocrity, honing you into someone capable of more than you thought possible. Yet here lies the paradox. Most people avoid this kind of practice. It feels uncomfortable. It highlights weaknesses. It demands concentration when it would be easier to drift into autopilot. Playing the same easy song on the piano is satisfying, but playing the difficult passage until your fingers ache, that is where growth lives. Writing the sentences you already know flows smoothly, but wrestling with words that resist you, that is where the writer is born. Deliberate practice asks us to step willingly into discomfort again and again, because that is where hidden potential is unearthed. And though it often feels lonely, the process carries its own quiet beauty. Each mistake is not a wall, but a signpost, pointing toward the next lesson. Each correction is proof that you are shaping something invisible into something real. There's a story of a basketball player who, after losing a game, stayed in the gym until midnight, shooting the same missed shot over and over until he could no longer miss it. That moment is not glamorous, not celebrated, not even seen, but it is there, in the shadows of practice, where the future victory is written. And maybe you've had moments like that yourself. Perhaps you stayed up late reworking a presentation, rewriting a line of code, or rehearsing for a performance no one else thought much of. At the time, it may have felt like struggle, but those hidden hours are not wasted. They are the quiet deposits in the bank of your potential, the investments that compound into moments of breakthrough. There is also a rhythm to practice, a cycle of trying, failing, resting, and trying again. Muscles need recovery to grow. So do minds. Rest is not the absence of practice, but the partner of it, allowing the lessons to sink deeper, the skills to settle into place. The brain, in its quiet hours, continues to stitch together what the body struggled to master. The science of practice also tells us something liberating. You don't have to be extraordinary every day. You only have to be consistent. A little progress made repeatedly outpaces occasional bursts of effort. Like water dripping on stone, persistence wears away resistance. And so, when you watch someone perform with brilliance, remember that you are not witnessing talent alone. You are seeing the shadow of practice, the invisible hours made visible. Greatness is not found in the spotlight. It is forged in the quiet, in the repetition, in the refusal to stop trying. So ask yourself, where in your life are you willing to practice deliberately, to lean into the edge of discomfort and stay there long enough for change to happen? Because practice is not punishment. It is possibility in motion. And every time you choose to practice with intention, you are chiseling away at the stone that hides your hidden potential, revealing more of what was always inside you. There's a moment, after the practice room goes quiet, when the question turns from how to who. Who are you becoming as you do the work? The secret doors to hidden potential aren't only opened by technique, they swing on the hinges of character. Not the kind written on certificates or etched into resumes, but the kind that shapes what you do when no one is clapping, when the path is foggy, when your ego would prefer an easier story. Picture yourself returning to that dim rehearsal space from last night. The lights hum. The chair remembers your shape. On the music stand sits the same stubborn passage that mocked you yesterday. Skill tells you which notes to play. Character decides whether you will sit down and play them again. You take a breath, and without knowing it, you summon a small council within. Curiosity asks, "What happens if I try a new bowing?" Grit replies, again. Humility whispers, "Maybe I should ask for help." And resilience says, "If this breaks me a little, I will grow back stronger." Adam Grant invites us to see these not as personality labels, but as trainable skills. Levers you can grasp and strengthen. Curiosity is a muscle. Use it, and it hungers for more questions. Humility is a practice. Choose it, and it keeps making room for learning. Grit is a habit. Repeat it, and endurance gathers like thread weaving a rope. Resilience is a rhythm. Fall and rise, until rising becomes your reflex. You carry these skills with you into an early morning run. The air is cool and honest. A mile in, your lungs complain, your legs ask if this is truly necessary. You notice the fork. Push or pull back. Curiosity nudges first. What if I adjust my breath? 4 steps in, 4 steps out. You try. It helps. Humility follows. I started too fast. I can slow down and still keep going. You do. Grit takes the lead in the last hill. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. 1 more mailbox. Now, 1 more. And when you crest and feel the soft burn behind your ribs, resilience taps your shoulder. See? You didn't shatter. You stretched. Character skills are not thunderclaps. They're weather patterns. You shape them by designing the climate around you. Put a book on the pillow and you'll read more at night. Put your shoes by the door and you'll run more in the morning. Place your instrument on a stand, not in a case, and practicing becomes frictionless. Adam Grant calls this the power of context, scaffolding that makes the right choice easier than the wrong one. Character grows faster when the environment quietly cheers it on. You see it at work and conversation, too. There's a colleague whose feedback always seems to sting. You've avoided them because critique feels like a bruise. But today, humility knocks first and you open the door. You ask for their view and they share it. Not unkindly, just plainly. Curiosity keeps you from defending yourself too soon. You ask, "Can you show me where the logic gets fuzzy?" They do. Grit helps you sit with the discomfort long enough to learn something. And resilience lets you integrate the insight without letting it puncture your sense of worth. You leave with a page of notes and a lighter heart, surprised by how much bravery hides inside simple listening. Character isn't only about pushing harder, it's about aiming wiser. Curiosity doesn't accept the first problem handed to you. It checks whether you're climbing the right mountain. Humility doesn't shrink your voice, it tunes it to reality. Grit isn't grinding for its own sake. It's staying with the useful pain and discarding the needless kind. Resilience isn't pretending you're fine, it's telling the truth and moving anyway. When these skills braid together, stamina meets strategy, and effort stops feeling like self-punishment and starts feeling like self-respect. There's a ceramic studio you visit on a whim. The teacher places a lump of clay on the wheel and centers it with calm hands. You try. Your bowl collapses. You try again. It warps like a smile that doesn't quite know what it wants to be. The teacher doesn't rescue you. They scaffold you. 1 cue at a time, elbows in, steady pressure. Breathe. You notice what's happening beneath your frustration. Curiosity keeps you investigating the wobble. Humility lets you copy the teacher's posture without embarrassment. Grit holds your palms to the spinning clay past the point of tidy outcomes. Resilience turns collapse into data, not identity. By the 5th attempt, a shape holds. It's not beautiful yet, but it's real, and you made it by staying. Here's a quiet truth. Grant surfaces. Character skills compound when shared. You build more humility by sitting with people who value truth over status. Your curiosity grows in rooms where questions are currency. Your grit becomes less brittle when you're surrounded by peers who rest too, reminding you that recovery is part of courage. Your resilience strengthens when mentors normalize failure and model the art of beginning again. Potential feels personal, but it's also communal. A village isn't a luxury. It's a technology. Of course, character can be misapplied. Grit, without curiosity, keeps you sprinting down the wrong hallway. Humility, without resilience, can drift into self-doubt dressed as virtue. Resilience, without humility, hardens into denial. Curiosity, without grit, becomes an endless buffet of beginnings. Part of growth is learning which dial to turn up, which to turn down, and when. That's not a flaw, that's mastery. One evening, you sit with an old journal and read earlier entries. The voice on those pages is earnest and impatient. It wants the summit without the switchbacks. You smile at your past self, not unkindly, just with the tenderness you reserve for someone who's trying. You notice a change. Your current goals are smaller in scope and larger in consistency. You set up check-ins, you track effort, you celebrate unglamorous wins. 5 new lines written, a hard conversation approached, a calendar block protected like a promise. This is character in motion. Not a declaration of who you are, but a record of what you chose, especially on the days no one else could see. And when the inevitable setback arrives, an audition missed, a project rejected, a plan delayed, you don't narrate it as a verdict. You treat it like weather, inconvenient, temporary, instructive. You ask the questions that character has taught you to ask. What part was under my control? What will I try differently next time? Who can I learn from now? How do I rest without quitting? Then you do something wonderfully ordinary. You begin again. If skill is the map and practice is the walking, character is the way you carry the pack, the balance, the patience, the willingness to adjust the straps when they rub. It keeps you from throwing the pack into the ditch when the path narrows. It lets you notice the valley's wildflowers even as you climb. Most of all, it teaches you to love the traveler you're becoming. Not because the journey is easy, but because you are the kind of person who continues. Somewhere ahead, there will be a performance, a launch, a moment where others finally see what you have been building. They will call it talent, maybe even luck. You will nod and thank them. And in your chest, quietly, you will know what truly carried you here. The character skills you practiced until they felt like second nature. Curiosity that kept opening doors. Humility that kept your feet on the ground. Grit that kept you moving. Resilience that helped you rise. Hidden potential is not a secret identity waiting to be revealed in a single dramatic scene. It is the daily choreography of character. Steps you repeat until the person doing them feels inevitable. That inevitability, earned one choice at a time, is the most astonishing thing about you. Not that you were born for this, you stood in a classroom, or maybe at a new job, faced with information that seemed to pour down on you like rain you could barely hold in your hands. Your mind raced, trying to keep up, but all you could feel was the weight of not knowing. That feeling, the awkwardness, the confusion, the uncertainty, is not a flaw. It is the very soil in which learning takes root. Adam Grant insists that hidden potential isn't unlocked by what we already know, but by how we choose to learn. To learn is to step willingly into the role of beginner, again and again, even when the ego longs to stay in the safety of mastery. It is to replace the pride of certainty with the humility of curiosity. Imagine a scientist in a lab. The air smells faintly of chemicals, papers litter the desk, and test tubes wait for answers. The scientist isn't trying to confirm how smart they are trying to uncover what they don't know. Their progress depends not on protecting their reputation, but on asking questions that may lead to failure. This, too, is how we learn, not by performing knowledge, but by seeking what humbles us. Learning how to learn means developing a relationship with ignorance that isn't filled with shame, but with wonder. It means hearing the phrase, "I don't know," not as an admission of weakness, but as a doorway to possibility. Every child instinctively understands this. They ask, why? with relentless energy, tugging at the world until it gives up its secrets. Somewhere along the way, many of us stop asking. We fear looking foolish. We trade discovery for dignity. But dignity without growth becomes a prison. So, how do you return to that childlike wonder? Begin by noticing your resistance. When someone challenges your perspective, do you close off or lean in? When you stumble on a new concept, do you retreat or dig deeper? To learn well, you must risk embarrassment. You must ask the question that feels too simple, attempt the problem that feels too advanced, speak the answer you're unsure of. Every risk is a rehearsal in courage. There's a story of a language learner, terrified of sounding foolish. For months they studied grammar, filled notebooks with vocabulary, but rarely spoke aloud. Then, one day, in a cafe, they forced themselves to order a meal in that foreign tongue. The pronunciation was clumsy, the words misplaced. The waiter smiled kindly, corrected them, and brought the dish anyway. That small moment of risk, of daring to look unpolished, did more for their learning than weeks of silent study. Because learning accelerates when we act, not when we hide. The science of learning shows us that mistakes are not signs of failure. They are the data our brains need to grow. When you get something wrong, neurons fire, connections reshape, the mind adapts. Error is not the opposite of learning. It is learning's pulse. If you protect yourself from mistakes, you protect yourself from growth. And yet, learning is not only about effort. It is about strategy. Good learners design their environment to make knowledge stick. They space out practice instead of cramming. They test themselves instead of only reviewing notes. They explain concepts to others, knowing that teaching is the sharpest form of understanding. They play with ideas, not just repeat them. To learn is to build habits that make curiosity sustainable. But perhaps the deepest truth is this: learning never ends. The moment you see yourself as finished, you quietly begin to decay. The most vibrant lives are lived by those who carry the heart of a beginner, no matter their age or achievements. Think of the artist who, after decades of success, tries a new medium and becomes a student again. Or the leader who admits in front of their team, "I don't know the answer, but let's find out together." These are the people whose potential keeps expanding because they have made peace with the discomfort of not knowing. So, as you walk your own path, ask yourself, are you willing to look foolish in the service of growth? Are you willing to be a beginner again, to open yourself to the awkwardness, the uncertainty, the joy of discovery? Because hidden potential is not uncovered by clinging to what you know. It is revealed by stepping into the unknown, armed with nothing but curiosity, humility, and the courage to keep asking. In the end, learning is not about reaching a final state of knowledge. It is about becoming the kind of person who never stops moving toward the horizon. The more you learn, the more you see how much there is to learn. And that endlessness, rather than being discouraging, is what makes life so deeply alive. Think for a moment about the last time you celebrated someone's achievement. Maybe it was a friend landing a new job, a sibling graduating, or a colleague finishing a daunting project. From the outside, their success might have looked like the product of individual brilliance. But if you peered behind the curtain, you would find a constellation of helpers, mentors, encouragers, challengers, quiet allies. Success, Adam Grant reminds us, is never truly a solo act. It is the village behind the individual that makes hidden potential visible. Imagine an orchestra. The spotlight may fall on the soloist, but the music swells because of every violin, every horn, every drumbeat supporting from behind. In the same way, your growth depends not only on your willpower, but on the networks that hold you steady, push you forward, and sometimes even pull you back when you drift off course. Think of a young athlete whose parents drive them to practices, whose coach designs grueling drills, whose teammates cheer in the quiet moments when doubt creeps in. Or the student whose teacher takes an extra 5 minutes after class to explain a concept, who leaves the door open for questions, who sees ability where the student sees only struggle. These hidden figures rarely make headlines, but their fingerprints are all over the achievement that follows. Maybe in your own story, you can name someone like this: a mentor who nudged you toward an opportunity you didn't believe you were ready for, a friend who told you the truth when you needed to hear it most, a partner who believed in you so fiercely that you began to borrow their confidence until it became your own. These are not mere side characters. They are co-authors in the story of your potential. But the village is more than cheerleaders. Sometimes the people who unlock your growth are the ones who frustrate you, the colleague who pushes back on your ideas, forcing you to sharpen them, the competitor who raises the bar so high you have no choice but to stretch further, the friend who won't let you wallow when you want to quit. Support does not always come in the form of comfort. Often it comes as challenge. Grant emphasizes the power of scaffolding, structures of guidance and accountability that make growth possible. Just as a fragile sapling grows straighter when tied to a sturdy stake, people grow stronger when surrounded by mentors, peers, and communities that hold them upright. Left alone, potential often bends under the winds of doubt. With scaffolding, it grows tall. Yet building such a village requires humility. You must admit that you cannot do it all alone. You must invite others into your journey, accept their help, and sometimes their correction. That openness transforms relationships from shallow acquaintances into deep partnerships in growth. Picture a circle of friends gathered in someone's living room. One is struggling with a career decision, uncertain and afraid. They share their doubts. The group listens, not to judge, but to ask questions, to reflect back strengths, to remind the speaker of what they cannot see in themselves. That simple conversation may not look like much from the outside, but it can change the trajectory of a life. That is the power of community. It holds mirrors where you cannot, and it lifts burdens that are too heavy to carry alone. And here's the surprising truth. Your village is not only made of people you know personally. Books, podcasts, teachers you'll never meet, even strangers who model courage in their own lives, they all can serve as mentors from afar. Every voice that challenges you, every story that inspires you, every example that sparks new belief adds to the scaffolding of your potential. So ask yourself, who is in your village? Who are the ones pushing, guiding, believing, shaping, and equally important, whose village are you a part of? Because the gift of support is reciprocal. As you grow, you also become scaffolding for others, helping their hidden potential rise into view. The myth of self-made success crumbles under this truth. We rise together. The soloist may shine, but the orchestra makes the music. And when you embrace the village behind your growth, you discover that potential is not just personal. It is communal, woven from the voices, hands, and hearts of many. If you close your eyes and imagine progress, what shape does it take? Most of us picture a line, straight, clean, rising steadily from left to right, each step higher than the last. That image is comforting. It promises predictability. But the reality of growth is far messier. Progress does not climb like a staircase. It meanders. It dips, stalls, surges, and sometimes even backtracks. To truly see hidden potential, you must first unlearn the myth of the straight line. Think of learning to play an instrument. At first, every week brings obvious improvement. You go from noise to melody, from fumbling to fluency. But then comes the plateau. Days of practice yield no noticeable change. You wonder if you've peaked. Frustration whispers, "What's the point?" Yet often, just beyond that flat stretch lies a sudden leap, a breakthrough that seems to appear overnight, though in truth it was built invisibly during the quiet grind. This is the curve of real development. Uneven, unpredictable, profoundly human. The plateau is not proof of stagnation. It is proof that your mind and body are busy weaving deeper connections beneath the surface. Like roots spreading underground before a tree bursts upward, progress often hides before it shows. Adam Grant urges us to honor this hidden rhythm. Too often we mistake dips and detours for failure when they are actually part of the process. Consider the writer who spends weeks stuck on a chapter, words circling without landing. Then, one afternoon, the dam breaks. Paragraphs flow as if from nowhere. Or the runner whose times stubbornly refuse to improve until suddenly the body adapts and speed increases. The line looks flat, but the truth is the work was always accumulating, waiting for its moment to reveal itself. To redefine progress, you must expand your patience. Growth demands a long view. A farmer does not dig up seeds each morning to check if they've sprouted. They water, wait, and trust that time and effort are conspiring underground. Your potential, too, often germinates in silence, only to bloom when you least expect it. There is also a deeper gift in the unevenness. The setbacks, the pauses, the unexpected turns. They teach resilience. A straight, effortless path would leave us fragile, untested, unable to withstand real challenge. The crooked path, though frustrating, builds the muscles of persistence. It prepares us not only to succeed once, but to keep succeeding when circumstances change. Maybe you can see this in your own story. A skill you thought you had mastered suddenly felt clumsy again. A project that seemed promising stalled midway. An ambition you carried faltered, forcing you to recalibrate. At the time, it may have felt like defeat. But look closer. Perhaps those detours gave you something more valuable than quick success. Perspective, adaptability, humility. The line did not go straight, but it still went forward. And here's the quiet truth. The curve of progress never truly smooths out. No matter how much you achieve, there will always be another plateau, another dip, another leap waiting ahead. Potential is not a single summit to reach. It is an endless horizon. Once you accept that, the jagged path stops feeling like failure and starts feeling like life. So the next time your growth feels stalled, remember, the line is not broken. It is simply bending beneath the surface. Trust that your efforts are compounding, that your hidden potential is germinating, even when you cannot yet see it. And when the breakthrough comes, as it so often does after long waiting, you will realize that progress was never meant to be straight. It was meant to be human. There is a certain kind of wisdom that arrives only after we've tasted achievement. You climb a mountain, you reach the summit, and for a moment, the view steals your breath. But soon after, a quieter voice whispers, "What now?" Potential fulfilled in one area has a way of revealing new horizons in another. The more you grow, the more you realize how much more there is to learn. And so, Adam Grant invites us into one of the deepest lessons of all, becoming a lifelong beginner. To be a beginner is to stand again at the edge of the unknown, palms open, heart unguarded. It is to trade the illusion of mastery for the humility of curiosity. This is not easy. The higher you climb, the greater the temptation to protect your status, to hide behind expertise, to cling to what you know. But hidden potential doesn't live in what is already certain. It waits in the spaces where you are once again unsteady. Picture an accomplished pianist, celebrated for their skill, choosing to learn the cello. Suddenly, the hands that danced effortlessly across keys fumble with strings. The melodies collapse into awkward scratches. Pride could whisper, "You've already proven yourself. Why risk this?" But the pianist continues anyway, remembering that the joy of growth was never in perfection, but in discovery. This willingness to unlearn, to start over, is what keeps potential alive. The world is full of people who peaked early and then coasted, clinging to their one moment of brilliance, but the ones who continue to expand are those who embrace the discomfort of beginning again, who understand that every new skill, every fresh challenge stretches the fabric of who they are. Perhaps you've seen this in leaders you admire. The executive who admits to their team, "I don't know, but let's figure it out together." The teacher who, after decades in the classroom, still experiments with new methods. The parent who learns from their child. allowing wisdom to flow both directions. These are people who wear their humility like armor, not because they lack confidence, but because they know confidence doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from being willing to seek them. Becoming a lifelong beginner also protects us from the weight of identity. When we tie our worth too tightly to one skill, one role, one achievement, we risk fragility. What happens if that role is taken away? What happens when the world changes and our skill becomes obsolete? But when we see ourselves not as finished products but as learners forever in motion, we stay supple, resilient, unbreakable. Think of the craftsman who, after mastering wood, picks up clay, or the athlete who, when their body can no longer perform as it once did, channels their discipline into coaching. Each time they begin again, they honor not just the skill, but the spirit of becoming. They remind themselves that potential is not a reservoir to be drained, but a river that keeps flowing as long as you keep moving with it. This mindset transforms the way you see mistakes. Instead of treating them as threats to your identity, you welcome them as companions on the path of learning. To be a beginner is to expect error, to laugh at it, to use it. It is to know that clumsiness is not a flaw, but a sign that you are expanding. And perhaps most importantly, becoming a lifelong beginner keeps joy alive. Mastery can bring pride, yes, but beginnings bring wonder. The thrill of the first breakthrough, the spark of discovery, the quiet amazement of seeing yourself do something you once thought impossible. These moments never lose their magic. They remind you that growth is not only about achievement, it is about aliveness. So, as you reflect on your own journey, ask yourself, where can you be a beginner again? What skill, what idea, what experience could stretch you into a new shape? And are you willing to embrace the humility, the awkwardness, the beauty of starting fresh? Because hidden potential is not a mountain you conquer once. It is a horizon that moves with you, always just beyond reach, always urging you to take the next step. In the end, to become a lifelong beginner is to make peace with endless becoming. It is to accept that your story is not about arriving at perfection, but about expanding into possibility. And if you can hold on to that, you will discover that the most powerful potential is not what you've already achieved, but what you are still brave enough to seek. There is music in unfinished things. A song that trails off before the final chord, a story that ends mid-sentence, a painting left with brush strokes still wet. Something inside us leans forward, waiting, aching for resolution. And maybe that is the truest metaphor for potential. It is not a finished statue standing still, but an unfinished symphony, still unfolding, still calling us to play the next note. Adam Grant closes his journey with this reminder: potential is never fixed, never final. Whatever you have achieved, no matter how high or how far, there is always more hidden within you. Not in a way that diminishes what you've already done, but in a way that honors your endless capacity to grow. Life is not a single crescendo. It is a series of movements, each revealing a different melody of who you are becoming. Think of a tree. Each year it sheds its leaves, grows new ones, stretches higher, digs deeper. It does not finish. It simply continues. In the same way, your story is not complete. Every failure, every victory, every quiet choice adds another layer to the trunk of who you are. The rings of growth are still being written, invisible today but etched forever into your being. And isn't there freedom in that? Too often we burden ourselves with the pressure of arrival. We say, when I get the promotion, then I'll be enough. When I finish this project, then I'll be whole. When I reach that goal, then I'll have proven myself. But the truth is gentler. You are already in motion, already becoming, already enough. Not because you've arrived, but because you're still alive to continue. Hidden potential is the art of living in unfinishedness. To wake each day and ask, what note will I add to the song today? What brushstroke will I lay down? What chapter will I begin? None of it needs to complete the picture. All of it matters because it keeps the music playing. Perhaps the most powerful truth is this: your potential is not only for you. The growth you choose ripples outward. When you persist through struggle, you model resilience for others. When you seek feedback with humility, you invite honesty into your community. When you begin again as a lifelong learner, you give permission for others to start anew. Your unfinished symphony weaves into theirs, creating a chorus larger than any single life. So tonight, as this story draws to a close, take a deep breath. Feel the weight of what you've carried and the lightness of what is still possible. Whatever your age, whatever your past, your symphony is not over. It is still swelling, still layering themes and variations, still reaching for notes you have not yet imagined. The science of achieving greater things is not about perfection. It is about persistence, curiosity, humility, character, community, and the courage to stay unfinished. Because only unfinished lives can keep growing. Only unfinished songs can keep surprising. Only unfinished symphonies can keep singing through the ages. So let the world hear yours. Play the next note, paint the next stroke, take the next step, and trust that hidden within you is still more, always more, waiting to rise, 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 waiting to rise.